If you have watched my other videos, then you would find lots of elements that change from one state to another. One of it is going from this toggle menu, which is opening a menu and closing it, or this one like collapsing and then opening again. If we go to the custom off canvas menu, you would see it just opens and close. So there are two states between them. Same with pop-up, open and close like this. Then we got our floating bar, you could see open and close. And this one is also there. It doesn't really have to be open and close, it just have to be from one state to another. It could be change in color, change in background, just changing in text or anything that you want. And for that I use very simple and basic JavaScript that you can learn today. It's very basic. Even if you're not familiar with coding, you would be able to do it. And the stuff that we are going to learn is, and that is a code which is like called class list, and I use this very often. So class list.add, class list.remove, class list.contains, and class list.toggle. So there are 4 of it, and it's very basic. So even if you do not know coding, even if you don't know, or if you are completely beginner, you should still be able to do it. It's very powerful. This also allows you to create your own, let's say like a tab. So if you go to tabs like this, and you could say this is also something that you could make by creating this class list. I'm not going to show you in this video. I will probably create like another video, but for now let's just learn this one. And for this video we are actually going to create something like this without the text and this button. We are just going to create this scaling up function when you click on it, and it is not limited to just this one. You can actually create lots and lots of stuff which can be controlled from one state to another, and you would understand it nicely if you watch the full video. And by the way, if you want to just get this as a paid template, I have already created a paid template, and also there's free code in here. So if you want to create from scratch, you could just watch the video. I've already created the video on it like this with all the code and all, so everything's provided. So let's get started. First let's create, I guess, 4x4. Let's make it some more height. Let's do, I guess, full width. And in here let's just add some images. So I just added the 4 images in here, and each of them just have 25% of the full width stuff around here. So what would happen if I made this bigger? You could see it suddenly starts pushing each or the rest of it behind, which means that if I can somehow control that when I click on it, this one just extends to 75 or changes to 75, it would create a nice animation of it opening. So let me first give you some basics, okay? So we do use CSS for it. CSS is very easy to learn. It's very basic coding, but I would give you some easy explanation in here. So let's say if I go into this container, which is the second one, and I call this as column 2 because it's my second one. So when we use CSS classes, it's usually used for, we use CSS to style something. Okay, one more thing, you can actually just go in here and then do the styling itself by custom CSS if you have Elementor Pro. If you don't have it, we will use the HTML method, because even if we are not using CSS, we are still going to need the HTML method or HTML widget method. But if you want to get Elementor Pro, you could actually use the link in description to get it. And if you use the link in description, that way you could support me, as it's an affiliate link and you pay nothing extra, but Elementor just gives me a small cut for just leading you to their website. So that way you could support me. So here's what we are going to do. We are going to use HTML widget, and if I type style in here, anything in here can be used as our custom CSS. So even if you don't have Elementor Pro, you could do this method to add custom CSS. I'll type dot. The reason why we are typing dot is because we are using CSS class. If you go in here, you could see we have CSS ID and CSS classes. If we were using ID, we would type hash in here like this. Oops, that's dollar hash in here. But we are using class, and I use class commonly. So you just type dot, curly brackets, open, and anything you add in here would be added to this much. So let's say if I add width 75%, and you could see it's suddenly scaling up to be 75%. And let's say for some reason it's not happening. and there's one reason why it cannot happen, or there's one reason why it might not happen to you guys. Okay, you could see when we click on it, it is set to 25. So Elementor has already added this code with 25% to our column, and when you add it again, the website might be like, okay, we have two of the same code, so which one should we use? By default it is working, but in case it does not work, we have a way to override the value which Elementor has already made, because Elementor is adding the CSS styling for us. That's why it's called a drag and drop builder, because if it wasn't, then we would be using like coding like this. So you could type exclamation point and then do important, and what this means is that if there are multiple values which have the width which has been given, like the same code with 25, 30 maybe, then this one says that, okay, this one should take the highest priority and just ignore anything else. So you could do that. Okay, and you could say it's suddenly scaling. If I do transition, and transition allows us to add some transition between two states. So if I type width, because I want the transition of width to be 0.5 seconds. And if you had more stuff, let's say if you had opacity, then you would do comma and then add some stuff like this, 0.2 seconds and all. So you would do like multiple stuff, or you could just type all 0.2 seconds. So where is it? 0.2 seconds. And now everything would just be using 0.2 seconds. I like to keep it controllable, so I'll just do 0.5 seconds. And now if I make this to be 25, you could say it does not suddenly go up, it slowly scales down like this. This is how we add CSS to our page, and it's very easy. It's like very basic. You see width 75, anyone can just understand what it is. If you just type like background red, it's not going to be showing anything because our background is now using what you call the dog image. But if I type important, it's going to use that. So you could say it's very basic English language that we use for CSS classes or CSS styling. You could learn it like very fast. But now here's the thing. We have given it width 75, but we don't want it to be 75 by default, right? We want it to be only this size when we click on it. Then what we can do is we can completely remove this CSS class, and we can call it, I guess, column active, something like this. Don't type just active, because if some other plugin or Elementor has added the same CSS class active, it might overwrite. So it's good to add something like column active, which is why lots of the time I would have like DM dash column dash active. I just type DM because that's like my website's name, DM, and then it just makes sure that I'm not messing with another code accidentally. So I'll just type column active. Now if I go into this one, you would say it's given column 2, right? Obviously it's not going to do anything to this one because this needs to be given column active. So if I go in here and type space column active, you would see suddenly it's now using, and if I remove it, it's going back. Okay, and you could say it's not actually working perfectly when going back, because right now this is column 2. Let me go in here and type column 2 and make sure the transition is same for this one too. Okay, because when we remove this code, it does not use it anymore, right? So it's not using this code at all, which is transition duration. But if you also add it here, then it's going to use it there too. So make sure to add for both, and if I do this, remove it, you could see we got a nice transition. Now we need some way to add this class to this container when we click on it. And for that we use JavaScript, which is very basic one. You're not going to do like anything crazy. I'm also not really that good at JavaScript, so you would just know that if I can do it, you would be able to do it after this video easily. So just make sure to watch. To add anything which is JavaScript, we type script like this, and here we can type our JavaScript. Now the way JavaScript works is a bit different than just typing style like this by typing comma and all, because in JavaScript we need to actually get the element which is in our document. So this is called our document, our page. We need to get the element and add it in a variable, and it's very basic. Do not get confused. Let me open a paint. What's a variable? Well, it's basically a container. I should connect my pen, but right now I'm using mouse to draw. So we are just creating a container and then we are putting a label on it like this. And we can just, you know how there are like containers in your home and maybe there are labels on it which would say, I guess, pickle, like this, chickpea, pickle, or anything like fruit name or anything. Now we just want, whenever we create a variable, we create this container and then we can name it anything that we want. Okay. So to make it easy to make it easy for us to understand, we give the label something that makes sense, right? So for me, I'm just going to call this one label as column 2. Oh, sorry, we cannot use dash in JavaScript. So I'll just call it column 2, which is same as our CSS. We can type anything. It doesn't have to be column 2. You could name it like even random stuff. I don't know, Italy. Even if you type Italy, it's still going to work. But just keep in mind, we are creating a label, which is column 2. There are two types of variable that we can create, constant and let. It's very basic. If we create a constant variable, it cannot be changed later. If we use let variable, it can be changed later. So for example, in JavaScript, we could do some mathematical functions too, right? So if we type a constant called x, basically we created a container and we put a label and we named the label as x and we give it as phi. If we go in future and say make the x to be 10, it's not going to work because we set it to constant. And usually we use constant when we want something to not be changed in future by accidentally, because if we, let's say, use let in here, we can accidentally change it in like code in future and that might be annoying. We only use let when we want to change it. It's not going to be important for this one, but actually it's going to be, but for now we will use constant for getting this CSS or this element to our JavaScript. So how do we type constant? We will call it column 2. Remember, we created a variable, we named it column 2. We cannot type dash in here. The reason is in JavaScript, dash actually means minus because we could do mathematical calculations in here. We will type constant, we will do equal to, because when we type equal to, we take anything that is on the right and then we place it in the left. So when we do constant, we can just say, okay, we just created a column and then I can actually go in future and then do this stuff like this. So this is like pre-made function in JavaScript. So just remember it, document.query selector. Then in quotation marks, we are going to say our CSS class, which is column 2. So basically we created a container called column 2. And then inside of this, we said that from a document, get the element which has the CSS class column 2 and add it in that container. So we just added it in this container. So now whenever we want to do some changes, we can simply reference this container and then do some changes to it. An easier way to do it is by just initializing it around here like this. So now we created a container and then we added the CSS class in there. Now we want to use another JavaScript function. So it is called event listeners. So what's an event listener? It's simple. We just specify which event we want to listen to when something is happening on our page. There are lots of events. For example, there is an event which is like load, which basically says that, okay, your whole page has been loaded. And then there is event listener like mouse over, which is simple as hover. So when our mouse goes on it, it would say that, okay, our mouse is over on it. There's click event, which we are going to use. Basically, when we click on something, it would send the JavaScript that, okay, we have clicked on that event. So here's what we are going to do. We are going to type column 2, which is this container. And we are saying that when this is clicked, so we'll add an event listener. Basically, the event listener keeps listening to it as long as this page has been, or any event that happens on this page is listened by it. But we are saying that only listen to this column 2. Instead of this, open curly brackets, in semicolon, type which event you want to listen to. So if I type mouse over, it would listen to any event when my mouse is over on it. And we can do click instead. And the easier way to remember if you miss something is just go into Google and find this Mozilla page and you could get some reference on it. You could see this click and then this stuff. So here's what we are going to do. We will type comma. We will do open and close these brackets. Stuff like this. Okay. So I created equal to. Is this less than or greater than? I don't know. We are creating an arrow icon with this one and then curly brackets. Now what's going to happen is whenever there's a click, we can run any function on it. So here's what we did. We did column2. Whenever there's an event on it, which event it is, it's click, then run this function like this. And there is one way to debug something or like check if something's working, which is called console.log. And then we can just type like clicked. Let's see if that works. I'm going to copy this and paste it in my script. This is where we add a JavaScript. And let's see. Nothing's going to happen because we didn't add anything. But if we go to inspect and go to console, let me refresh this. If you see any red color or yellow color errors in here, it means you did some mistakes in your code. Maybe you missed some comma or you missed some curly brackets. If you're not able to figure out the issue, copy this code in ChatGPT and it would give you like much faster way, because sometimes it's just hard to find like this dots and all, or if you misspelled something like this, and ChatGPT would give you like much faster answer. Now if I click on it, you would see it's showing clicked, and I'm clicking 3, 4, 5, 10 times, and you could see when I click everywhere else, it's not working. It's only working when I click on this one. In console log, you could even type here anything. Okay, it doesn't have to be just clicked. I'm just using it so we know. Now this is where we use our main functionalities, so which is class list add. When our column2 has been clicked, I will type column2 and then we will use this one, which is called class list add. Open the brackets. In the quotation mark, we will add which class we want to add to this one. So you could see when I type like this first one, and then I type dot class list, it's going to add this class to this element, which is same as. So if I choose this, it would, whenever I click, it will add this CSS class in here like this. And we are simply going to add it. Do not type dot in here. When we use class list, we do not type dot. I have made these mistakes a lot. This is, by the way, semicolon. This is a comma. This like what you call, this writer does not make it look like nicer. It just looks like a dot, but this is actually comma. If I go in here and then now paste it, let's do preview. Clicked on it, it's scaled. Now if I click again, nothing's happening, because right now we just have add. We have to now do remove. So when we click again, we want to remove this class. But just to show you guys one more thing, if I click on this one, this icon, and then click on this one, you would see this is the CSS class that we are using. You could see column2. This is the rest of the stuff that Elementor has added. You could see there are lots of CSS classes. It's not just the one that we have created. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But this is the one that we have created, column2. Now you could see there is no column active, but if I click on it, it just added and made column active in here. And then it's now using this CSS styling, whatever it is added in here. So even if I add, let's say, color red, background red, change the background URL to different image, you could make it. And that's how I've made like every single stuff in here. So you could see this one is basically just, so if you go in here, this one is nothing. We are just changing the Y translate value in here. You could see we are just changing the translate value of it, and I'm simply just flipping this what you call, this arrow. It's very, very basic. Even this one, even like lots of the stuff, it's just done like the same way. Even this one's like when I click on it, for this one it is a bit different because we are using GSAP animation, but I have done like this class list active and all in that too, for pop-up too, for this off canvas too, and you could even do for tabs and all. But now let's see how we can remove it. Now the thing is, if I click again, it's not automatically going to do remove. So if I just go in here and then type, let's say, remove, it's not automatically going to remove it after this one. What's if I click now? So if I do this, what's going to happen if I use this code is it's going to add it, but instantly it's going to remove it. So there's not going to be any effect. So we can do is I'm actually going to use like toggle in here, and let me just show you what toggle does. Basically it will remove and add it. And if I go in this one, you could see if I click on it, it's automatically removing it and adding it. You could see whenever I click, if I click again, it's doing this stuff. But there's going to be one issue with this method. So it's good to do for one element, but what if we want to do is, if I click again in here, so let me just do is, let's add something called column 1. We'll do this as column 3. We'll do this as column 4. And by the way, this is good enough if you have like something that goes from one state to another. But right now I just created like 4 columns, right? And I'm just going to do is, we can actually do is copy this and then do column 1, comma, column. So we already have 2, 1, 3. It's not in order, but it will work. Basically, if you use comma and then do this stuff, then we can add like same CSS class to multiple of it instead of creating like multiple stuff. Right now we need to get our column 1 like this, and let's get our column 1 like this. So what if I made another event listener called column 1? When we click on it, we want to also add it to column 1. Now there's going to be one issue that you will see. Let's go in this one. Let's add our script. Let's preview. I clicked on it. It works. And I clicked on it. Suddenly, this one is not getting smaller. And I have to click on it again and again if I want to make it smaller. You could see, kinda annoying, right? And which is why we cannot use toggle for like rest of it. Which is why we need to use add and remove when we want to do something which is like much more complicated, which is when I click on, let's say, this one, and then if I click on this one, it should make this one 3 to smaller state. Or basically we should remove the column active from this one, and this one like this. Now I'm going to do it in a bigger way and then I'll make it in a smaller way. The smaller way needs to, we change and then we do loop for this one, which would take a bit of time, but we'll do like an easier way so that if you're very new, you can just use this one. It's an easier way. It's like a bigger code, but for the smaller way, it's smaller code, but it's a bit complex. Not much. You would understand it after watching this video very easily. So when we do column 2, we can actually just select this one and then say remove this one. So when I click on column 2, I just want to remove this column active from column 1. Similarly, let's just make all of it. Okay, why not? Let's do column 3. Let's do column 4. This one should be column 3, column 4. Let's copy this like this. This is going to be column 3 and column 4. So what we are doing is when we click on column 2, we are going to remove this one from rest of it. Now, we will need to do for every single one of it, right? Because right now it's column 1. So let's do this one. Let's copy this. And here I'll change to 2. So now when I click on column 1, we are removing it from every single one of them. Let's see what this does, if it works nicely, because I'm not sure if this would work nicely or not. If I click on this one, it's working. If I click on it, it's making this smaller. We never created a function for this one, right? We never created an event listener for 3rd and 4th. So these are not working, but you could say this is also working perfectly fine. So if you want to do it this way, go for it. It just works nicely. You could see. Let's just check in here. Okay. So right now this one has column active. If I click on it, this one has column active and it just works nicely. So there is one way to do it, which is just simply creating an event listener for every single one of them. So this is 1, 2, create for 3, 4, and then remove it from every single one of them by choosing this one. So you would understand that making this one is like very easy if you just do it this way. but how about I make it a bit complex? Okay, rather than using four of the same, sorry, rather than using 1 2 3 4, how about I call this as column? I call every one of it as column. Okay, this is column, this is column, and this is column. For this one, we do not need to use this all of it. We can simply just call it dot column. Okay, and now all this code is not going to work because we changed the CSS class, right? So let's remove this much, let's remove this much, and let's do column like this. Now here's the thing, when we use query selector, and right now we have 4 CSS classes with column, it's not going to select all of it by default. It's only going to select the first one in the page, which is this one. So if we add like the event listener and all, even though all 4 of them have the same one, it's not going to work for all 4 of them. To show you guys quickly, let's type it, column add event listener. In JavaScript, you have to make sure that everything is same. So if you make anything capital, it should be capital, and you could see I've made E and L capital because that's just how it is made by JavaScript. Click, run this function. Let's do column dot add, sorry, class list dot add. It was called as what? I don't remember. It was called as column active. Let's copy this. Let's paste in here rather than our big code. It's now very smaller. You would see now all 4 of them have column. If I click on the second, third, or fourth, it's not working, but the first one, it works. So we cannot just use this one. We actually need to type all. When we do type all, it takes every single stuff which has column and then places it in here, but it actually stores it as an array. Array is very basic stuff. It's not complicated, so not get overwhelmed. When you type what's an array is basically, it will store like this in array, the first dot column, then the second column like this, and then the third column. Okay, and then fourth one like this. Just imagine it like this. I'm making it easier to understand. And when we use array, the first one is called 0, the second one is called 1, the third one is called 2. So basically it starts with 0. We don't really need to understand this much, but I just wanted to tell you guys that that's how it's stored. So here's what we need to do. We need to actually loop through every single one of them. So what would happen is, it would go for the first element or the first column, it will do all these animations, and then it would check for the second one, do it again, do it for the third one, and do it for the fourth one. And it happens very fast, so it looks like it happened instantly. This column, we will just type in here. I'm just going to like save it somewhere, maybe save it here. I'm just going to type column. I'll type for with E capital each, for each. Open this bracket, again open once more, and we will call it as a temporary variable. So this is like a temporary variable, and we can name it anything. And again, remember, variable is just a container with a label, so you could name it anything. I'll call it as column element because that's like easy to understand for me. Okay, so no comma. Here we typed comma, but here we do not type comma. And then like this. What we are doing is we are creating a temporary variable or local variable like this, which we have given a label, and we are giving it the label column element. Okay, I cannot type with mouse. Okay, so just know that this is column element, this container name. And what we do is, when for the first loop, so the first time when it goes from this code, it will take the first one and store it in here, and then do all the changes. Then when it runs this function, it will go to the second one like this, and then it would replace the first one, and then now this would be the second one in this container, and it would do all this code. Then it will take the third one, replace this one, and then do it for this one. So think of it as a temporary variable where we are just storing each one element in it inside of this one like this. Instead of doing anything in here, we need to do it for this one, because each time it is going to store it in this variable, right? I'll type dot class list add column active like this. Now what do you think would happen if I just use this one and added it in there? What do you guys think would happen if I just added just this much? Let's see. Are there any errors? No errors. Nothing's happening. But you could see one thing, each one of them has been added column active. See right now. Well, there's one more reason, because we didn't add this one, which is it should only happen when we are clicking on it, right? It should not happen like automatically. So before doing this one, we actually need to create the event listener. So we'll do column element dot add event listener. Because when we did this much, it automatically just looped without having any event and just added this column active by default. We need to do click. We have already done it multiple times. And when we click on it, we need to add this one. Okay, let's do this. Let's copy it in our script. Let's preview. There is only column in here. If I click on it, this one had column active. This one now has column active. This one has column active, and this one has column active. And you could see that it does work nicely. The only thing is it is not removing the column active class when we click on one of it. After we add the column active to the one that we have clicked, so you could see that it is only added to the one that has been clicked, right? Because rest of when it is basically looping through every single one of them and it's checking is there a click, it's like, okay, I have to only add the click to the element that has been clicked like this. So we need to remove the column active from rest of them except the one that is being clicked, right? Like this. So we can actually do is every time we click, we can loop it again. We can loop this element again and check for every single one of it. And remember, the way we loop is by typing column dot for each. And if you're thinking why we are not just using this one, okay, so we have already done a loop, right? We have already done a loop. Why are we not just going in here and then doing class list dot remove column active? Okay, the reason is simple, because this stuff, which is this one, only runs when we are clicked, but this stuff basically just runs instantly as soon as the page has been loaded. So as soon as the page loads, it's going to run this code. But if I, let's say, add it in here, it's not going to work, right? Because it's adding and then removing it again. We don't want to do that. Just why it's not going to work directly, because we need to loop again and then be like, hey, every time we click, let's loop this, loop all the columns and then remove the column active from rest of it. So let's say if I type column dot for each, this time we will call it something else because we already have a variable called column active, right? So if I try to do some changes to this column active again, then column element again, then it's not going to work. So let's just call it something as 2. Okay, just like very original, right? So we just created another container where we are looping through it again, and then this one we will just do column element 2 class list dot remove column active. So let's visualize what's happening. First, we are creating a column where we are basically creating a variable which has like all the elements which has the CSS class dot column in our page and storing it in an array. Then we are basically saying that we have to loop through each of those elements and then store each of them in a variable. So every iteration it would store in a temporary variable called column element. Then for that column element, we want to check if it's the one that has been clicked. So it would loop through it and then check if it's the first one that is clicked, is it the second one that is clicked, or whichever one it is clicked basically. As soon as it's clicked, it's going to run this function. the first thing we do is we loop through all the elements which are present again and basically remove it from every single one of them. See, as soon as we click, it basically does a loop through every single element and then it starts removing it one by one. So it stores the first dot column in this one and then it removes it. Then it stores the second one and then removes it. After it has been removing, so the code runs from top to bottom, right? So after it has been removing, we already have this column element, which is the previous one, and we are adding the column active to this one. So basically we remove it and then add it to the only one that has the column active. Script, let's do preview. And you could see now, if you go in here, you could see it just removes it. So every time I'm doing a click, it is removing column active from every single one of them and only adding to the one that has been clicked, like this, creating a really cool effect. And guess what? Another cooler stuff. If I just change this click to be mouse over, so if I go in here and then type this as mouse over, let's do preview. Guess what? Now I just need to do my mouse over. I don't even need to do clicks. Pretty cool, right? Now there is also like few more stuff which is like class list contains, and class list contains basically is a Boolean value which is like it says true or false. So basically we can use this to check if something or any element has this class or not. We didn't use it in this one. So let's quickly show you with the previous example, which is like the basic one, if it works or not. So we will do query selector. We will only do for the first one, okay? So that because we have already learned the main functionality of this video, but I think it would be cool to learn more stuff, which is like a bonus for this video. So I removed the column all, query selector all, sorry, so that now we are only going to do for the first element. We'll do column dot add event listener on click. Again, we are doing the same stuff. Okay, on click, what did we do? We did column and then we did class list add, right? Dot add. We did toggle, but if we do this one like active, it's just going to do is when I click on it, it's basically going to make is add a column active to this one. And remember, you could add like lots of stuff. You could even do any animation that you want. So again, it works. If you add anything in here, it's going to work. Even if you add like CSS animation in it, it's going to work. So basically, if I click on it and if you want this one to turn into like this floating kind of stuff, it's going to work. Any keyframe animations, if you know how to do it in CSS, you could do it perfectly in it. Now, obviously, we use toggled in here, right? Toggle CSS class, which basically is like an easy way to do it. But there's another stuff that we can use, which is called if condition. If condition is basically saying that if this is true, then only run the code. If it is false, then do nothing. You could even type else, and then it's going to be like, if this condition is true, it was going to run this code. If it's not true, if it's false, then it will do whatever is added in else. So let me show you what I mean. So if I type if, what should be our condition? Okay, so remember that if I click on it, we have column active in here. So if I click again, what needs to happen? It needs to remove it. So our condition is if our element already has column active, then remove it. That's all the condition we have. So let's remove this one and let's add a condition in here, and which is going to be if our column class list contains column active, like this. Remember, this is what I did. Okay, basically added this stuff in here. Then we open and close curly brackets, and anything that is in here would only run if this condition is true. So when this condition would be true, if our element has the class column active. What should happen when our class has already column active? Basically, if it's already having column active, and if we are clicking on it, then we need to remove it, right? So let's call it column dot class list dot remove column active. Why we are removing? Because it already has it, and this condition would be true, right? And then after this curly bracket, if I type else, in else we don't need to add any condition, because if this is false, then it's going to run this, right? So if this is false, it would run this. Basically, when would this be false? When our element does not have column active. So we need to add it in here. So if our element already has column active, remove it. If it does not, then add it. Let's do this stuff. Let's add in our script. This is how I added. I made like other stuff because I didn't know there was something called dot toggle, which made it easier. Like this. So you can see this works perfectly. Right now there is column active. The code is being like, okay, we already have a column active. Let's remove it. And then it's checking again every time we click. Hey, do we have a column active? Or we do not. Let's add it then. And this one basically allows you to create pop-ups. You could create like free pop-ups. You could even create like off sidebar, your any menu that you want. If you have like some like animation that you want to do. So if I click on this one and you want this one to turn into different image and anything that you want, you could just do it. Okay. One more thing, I know this is getting bigger, but one more thing that I want to show you is the let variable. And with let variable, we can do it without using class list contains. And it's very easy. We will create a variable, basically create a container and name it anything. So we'll put a label as, let's say, is column active. We can name it anything and we can just call it false. Remember how I said that this condition, this would give us true or false. If this one has a column active, it would give us false. So let me just do one thing. If I let's say click, every time I click, I will just type console.log and I'm just going to copy this much to show you guys. Okay, just to show you guys. Okay, you don't need to do this. If I go to my console, nothing's showing, but if I click on it, it showed false. Why? Because it didn't had column active. Now there is column active in here, so it should give true. False, true, right? See, and that is something that class list contains gives. It gives us true values. What if I just create a thing called is column active false? So by default, we are just creating a container and we are just saying, hey, this container is false by default. Then rather than using this one, class list contains, we can check if column active true. So if is column active is true, then we want to remove it, right? You can see this one would not work directly. Why? Because is column active is set to false by default. So first time when we click on it, it's going to say if false, it's not going to run this and it's going to run this. So how about we just try adding this and see if it works? And I know it's not going to work. Let's do script. Let's replace this. Let's go to the element. If I click on it, it added, but if I click again, it's not removing it. And why is it not removing? Because previously we used class list contains, which actually gave us like true and false value based on what's happening. But in this one, we created our own variable called false, but we are never changing it in future. It's not automatically going to change, right? Because this is something that we created. It's not doing anything. It's just a function which lets us know. It's basically like it's basically a variable which gives us true and false, but it's false, and even if I click on it, it's still going to stay false. So what needs to be happen is if I go in here and make is column active to false, sorry, fall true. Why? Sorry, not in here. It needs to be in here, right? Because when we add the column active, we know that our column is active. So again, remember that's why we use let, because let allows us to change any variable in future. So what's going to happen is if I click once, it's going to do is, hey, this was false. Is this true? No, it's not. So let's run this. It added the column active and then it changed the variable to true. So next time I click again, it's going to check that, hey, is this true? We already changed it. It's going to be true. So it's going to remove it. But again, when we remove it, we actually need to make sure that we are making this to false again. And I will actually change it to like a single line. So just keep watching. And if I do preview, I clicked on it, it's here and it's going down. So every time we click on it, it basically is changing this variable from true and false and stuff like this. But I'm going to show you very easy method instead of doing this. It's not going to do any changes, but we will type is column active outside of this one. Okay, so not in if and else, we are doing outside of this one. We'll type equal to, we'll type exclamation mark and type is column active. So we are saying is column active is not equal to, sorry, is equal to not column active. Basically what we are saying is that whatever variable, whatever is this value, just reverse it. So first time when we click on it, it is false, right? It's going to do this code, and then after it runs this, it's going to check, hey, is column active is set to false, exclamation says not false. Basically it is just reversing it and it's making it to be true. And we are not using if else condition for this one, it's just happening every time we click on it. Okay, so you can say it is outside our if else condition. So this one basically runs every single time, and every single time we click, we are basically switching from true, false, true, false, true, false, like this. Copy this, paste in here, preview,